is basically a complex structure made up of numerous neurons. Basically, there are billions of neurons which come together, get uniformed or get complexed or get accumulated to make the structure which is called brain. So if we divide the parts of brain, then brain can primarily be divided into three parts. One is the prosencephalon, then mesencephalon, and third one is the rhombencephalon. So the prosencephalon can also be called as forebrain. Mesencephalon can also be called as midbrain, whereas the rhombencephalon can also be called as hindbrain. So what are the structures, what are the parts of your brain which comes under the forebrain, under the midbrain and under the hindbrain? So let's see. This prosencephalon includes number one, which is olfactory bulb. Olfactory bulb is present just at the inferior part of your frontal lobe of the cerebral hemisphere. Second, cerebral hemisphere. So what is cerebral hemisphere? When you open up your cranium, then you can see a complex structure. That structure is actually the cerebral hemisphere. So cerebral hemisphere has two halves, two parts basically. One is the right cerebral hemisphere and another one is the left cerebral hemisphere. Both are connected together with the help of a structure called as corpus callosum. So after this cerebral hemisphere, you can see diencephalon. This diencephalon includes your hypothalamus and thalamus. These two structures, hypothalamus and thalamus, are present beneath your corpus callosum. The another part you can see under this prosencephalon or forebrain is telencephalon. So telencephalon includes, or telencephalon contains your amygdala and hippocampus, which is present in the forebrain. Now, what are the parts which comes under the hindbrain? The hindbrain consists of the larger part, which is cerebellum, whereas cerebral hemisphere or cerebrum is the largest part of your total brain. In this, if you talk about the cerebellum, then cerebellum is the largest part of your hindbrain only. After cerebellum, you can see pons varolii. After this, you can see medulla oblongata. Okay. So what about this midbrain? So midbrain contains some structures. The structures are like colliculi and tegmentum. Okay. Basically, this midbrain is in between the forebrain and hindbrain. Let's see the structure now. If you talk about the structure of this midbrain, forebrain and hindbrain, then you'll see See, this whole part is the cerebral hemisphere. This part is the corpus callosum. Under this corpus callosum, you can find the pituitary, this one the hypothalamus, then these two are thalami, collectively called as thalamus. If you talk about the cerebral hemisphere, then this one is the frontal lobe, this part is the parietal lobe, this one is the occipital lobe, and thus this portion just beneath the parietal you can see your temporal lobe of the cerebral hemisphere. That means if you talk about like this in your brain, here this part is the parietal, and this part is the temporal, here occipital, and here is the frontal of one half. Okay, this one is the cerebellum, this one is the pons varoli, and here your medulla oblongata is present. So this is whole brain. Now what about the midbrain? So midbrain is basically present here in between. The midbrain is basically present here in between. In between what? In between the two cerebral hemispheres and at the superior part of your cerebellum and this pons varoli. So if you see your cerebral hemisphere in an open condition, then only you can visualize the midbrain. Otherwise the midbrain cannot be visualized from the outside. From the outside you can only visualize the cerebral hemisphere, which is a part of forebrain, and the cerebellum, pons, and medulla oblongata, which is a part. So that's all for this class or this video lecture. See you in the next video. Thank you.